Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Hill Beyond, our second episode tonight, insightful conversations with our alumni. Today, we have the class of '87 is in the house. We have Changing the World for Good with our special panelists tonight, classmates Michael Barron, class of '87, and Tom Walter, class of '87, who are part of Get in the Game. So what is Get in the Game? Well, let me tell you a little bit about our guests tonight. Nearly 35 years after their graduations from the Hill, class of 1987 alumni Michael Barron and Tom Walter have teamed up to create Get in the Game, an experiential peer-to-peer learning platform designed to provide middle school and high school students with racial equity training that facilitates structural change by giving students the skills and resources to better understand themselves and to recognize the impact they can have when they are intentional with their words, thoughts, and actions. As Hill students, Michael and Tom's paths only crossed for 1 year, as Tom arrived at Hill from Western Pennsylvania in the fall of 1986 for a PG year. He was a member of the varsity basketball team and the undefeated 1987 baseball team, and then went on to attend and play baseball at Georgetown. Michael, meanwhile, lived locally as a Hill student, was a member of the Ellis Theater Guild, the Radio Club, and the co-curricular program, and then remained in the area where he attended Villanova. Since his graduation from Villanova, Michael has spent the past 30 years helping to build, grow, and lead asset management and venture capital firms. He has extensive experience with startup organizations, and he has helped take several firms from inception to over $1 billion in assets. He's a board member at the Foreign Policy Research Institute and the Sattel Institute. We'll have to learn what that is later tonight. Tom, meanwhile, is a highly successful Division I college baseball coach who is one of just 2 active coaches to lead 3 different programs to the NCAA tournament. The head coach at Wake Forest University since 2009, Tom made national headlines in 2011 when he selflessly donated a kidney to Kevin Jordan, who was a freshman outfielder at Wake Forest. After making a full recovery, Kevin went on to a successful college baseball career and graduated from Wake Forest in 2015 with a degree in communications. Shortly after George Floyd was killed in Minneapolis in June 2020, Tom and his former player, Kevin Jordan, were discussing what had taken place with when the idea for Get in the Game was formed. The duo viewed their story, Tom is white and Kevin is African American, as an opportunity to spread a positive message. They formed the organization with Tom acting as founder and board president and Kevin serving as the director of community relations. And then they approached Michael, who enthusiastically agreed to be the executive director. Before we hear about what Michael and Tom are up to today, let's take a quick walk down memory lane. And there we see Michael. We've got some sixth form portraits there, baby picture. Looks like a picture on the beach. Not sure what's happening in that one on the bottom right hand. It looks like Grey Poupon. It might be an old Grey Poupon commercial, maybe. Many of you probably don't remember those. And then here we are. There's Tom. Nice glasses, Tom. We'll have to talk about those. Hang loose and I love you. Take care. That looks like a typical PG page if I've ever seen one. So I'm going to invite Tom and Michael to join us here, start their video, and let's see if we can get a good conversation started. Are you guys there?
Hey, Zach.
Michael, how are you?
Good to see you.
Good to see you. I see Tom is not coming on. Maybe I scared him
Uh,
off. I scared him off with those photos.
I'll just have you know before we start, that Grey Poupon picture was not me. That was Tom.
Oh, that was Tom. All right. Were
That
you
that
guys? Were you imitating that old Grey Poupon commercial?
that was not my idea. I got talked into that one. That's when you're from Johnstown, Pennsylvania, there's not a lot of Grey Poupon sold in Johnstown, Pennsylvania.
I didn't know you were from Johnstown. Okay, so that's the home of the famous flood, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's an interesting story in and of itself. So, where are you guys coming to me live from tonight, Michael? Where are you?
I am in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania, so I'm just down the road tonight.
Okay, and you've certainly got the branding going there for getting the game. Very impressive. Is that a real background or virtual?
That is real.
It's real. Okay, mine is virtual. In case you were surprised. Yeah, hopefully you recognize the space behind me, but
Yeah.
I'm actually in my kitchen, so that wouldn't have been quite the background. Tom, how about you? Where are you tonight?
I'm in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, in my kitchen.
And has baseball season begun?
We are exactly 10 days away from our home opener, so we are in the throes.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that tonight too. It's obviously a year when college sports, high school sports are challenging, and I know that's part of your mission in getting the game a little bit as well too. So, well, you should know that we have a record-breaking attendance tonight. I think the word got out to some of the class of '87, so I'm hoping that they will be ready to do some heckling later tonight, or maybe some friendly softball questions. There's a little bit of baseball pun in there for you, Tom. Just so our attendees know, you can ask a question at any time by raising your hand. That's a little hand icon at the bottom of your screen, or you can type a question into Q&A, and we will get to those over the course of the night. All right, so let's go back to your Hill days first. So Mike, you'd been at Hill for a while, right? And then Tom shows up in your sixth form year as a PG.
That's right.
And how long before you guys got to know each other? Was it like first day or?
No, it was probably about 5 minutes because he lived next door. We lived on Mr. V's hall our senior year, so we were next door neighbors.
And which hall was that? What dorm?
Mr. Vollmer's Upper School West.
Upper School West. Which floor?
Second.
So that is a girls' floor now. So
Some would argue it was then.
I'm not sure about that. In any event, well, it's great, great memories, I'm sure, of upper school. That was a big dorm, big boys dorm back then, right?
It was all boys.
Yeah. So we have some students probably listening in tonight. Tell us a little bit about what Hill was like in 1987 as compared to what it is today, which I'm sure you know a little bit about. There's been some changes. What was it like to go to a big all boys school and seated meals every meal of the day and all of that?
Coach, you want to go first?
Sure. It was a big eye opener for me. Like I said, coming from a public high school in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, to see a campus. I had never really seen a campus that pretty, and certainly not at the high school level. So for me, it was, coming across state and kind of opening my eyes to the world, really for the first time. In my high school, you were 50% of our school was lucky to go on to further education, and most of that was vocational school. So there just wasn't a lot of aspirations beyond the city limits of Johnstown. So for me to get to the Hill and be exposed to the type of student that was there and be challenged on a daily basis was really great for me.
And Tom, how did you find out about Hill? Did a relative go here, or did baseball coach call you up, or how did it happen?
So I think my dad reached out. I wasn't sure where I wanted to go to school. There were some schools in Western Pennsylvania recruiting me, but my dad was a Penn grad and he had kind of eyes on a better academic situation. I wasn't a great high school student. And so my dad called the Hill, and then Doc Finn, who was the baseball coach at the time, as you know, drove out to Johnstown and watched me play and sat in my living room after the game and talked to me about the Hill and convinced me that it was the place for me.
So when you arrived as a new PG, had you been to the campus, or was it sight unseen?
Sight unseen.
Wow.
Yeah, it was again, it was an eye opener for me. And I just, again, financial aid made it possible for me to be there. And that's something that I'll never forget. And I try my best to repay that forward at every opportunity.
Got it. And Mike, how about you? You were fairly local at the time, right? You were just down the road.
I was, and I think that, coming to Hill was, and I tell this story regularly, it was a foundationally important experience for me, Zach. My father had passed away 6 months before I arrived on campus. So, I thinking back as you reflect over time, I probably walked through, in a lot of fog, the first part of my time on campus. And I most certainly credit the school, teachers, friends, for picking me up during a really dark time in my life. But looking back on that, it was the structure, it was the worldview, meeting people who were far different experiences than my own, being local, and then continuing those relationships over time that have really made all the difference.
And who were some of your early mentors on the faculty?
Mr. Parnell was a computer science teacher and my advisor. Most certainly had faith in me when I probably didn't have faith in myself. Although I never had Mr. Walbridge, he was always there and always sort of had this intuition, knew when something wasn't necessarily right, and would find a way to peel off and have a quiet conversation or a quiet word. And I don't think that he did that for any other reason other than he knew that kids needed that at that point. And my advisor during my independent study, my senior year, Mr. Dix, probably did more my senior year to help me get through that process and learn more about myself, and come to grips with my father's death, probably than anybody on campus.
Well, you mentioned both of you have mentioned some icons in Hill history and people that have made a big difference for a lot of students over the years. And mentioning Rick Walbridge, he and I got a chance to work together for a year, and certainly a towering figure in Hill history. So I'm glad you both had a chance to do that. So fast forward to this sixth form year, Tom walks in a little bit green from Johnstown, and Mike was a seasoned veteran of the Hill at that point. You guys are next door to each other in upper school, a dorm with about 120 kids probably in the time. I guess the fifth floor of upper school was open at that point, right? So it was a big dorm.
I think it was closed at that point, but you're right, it was. It didn't mean that you didn't visit the fifth floor. It just meant that there was nobody living on the fifth floor.
Well, the urban legend is the reason we don't have the fifth floor open anymore is because there's not a fire truck large enough in Pottstown that would reach the fifth floor. I've often thought about maybe the economics of that, whether we could purchase a new fire truck for Pottstown and add a fifth floor with 30 more students. But anyway, a story for another day.
Maybe a Hill Fire Department.
So Tom, who was your roommate? Was it another PG?
It was another PG, Owen Wallace, who ended up getting thrown out of school it's early in the spring. So I had a room to myself the last few months.
Shangri-La there for you, right?
No doubt. Yeah. And he was actually from my hometown. Coincidentally, there were two guys. We didn't go to the same high school. He went to a different high school, but I didn't know him before he got to the Hill School. So it was kind of crazy that I was living with somebody that, was from 15 minutes away from me.
And in terms of being a PG, and we have some families on the call tonight that are prospective students, and maybe there's some PGs calling in tonight. What was that experience like? And were you welcomed right away? Did you feel like you were part of the sixth form class, or did you sort of travel in a separate group with other PGs?
No, it was the best decision I've ever made, quite honestly. And, I don't know where I'd be without it. And very welcomed immediately. Mr. Volmuth was our hall monitor, as Michael said. And, having Michael and Jim Robertson across the hall, I mean, those guys were kind of salty vets. And they took me under their wing and showed me the ropes and made sure I knew how to sneak over to Little Italy for pizza late at night. So
it never happened, Tom. You never broke the rules here. Tom, did you know at the time when you came to Hill, was it your aspiration to become a baseball coach? or
No,
did Hill have an influence on that?
not at all. I was still naive enough to believe I was going to play in the major leagues at that point. So, and it wasn't until my freshman year of college when I saw Mo Vaughn play that I figured out that what a real major leaguer looked like. But
by the way, Mo Vaughn is a graduate of Trinity Pauling, another boarding school.
That's right.
Yeah. Anyway, just a little known fact. So you didn't figure out, you progressed to baseball coach as a career aspiration later.
Yeah, just by dumb luck, really. I graduated college and, was trying to decide if I was going to keep playing or not. And an opportunity popped up to be the grad assistant at GW. And, I was thinking about, going to play a year of professional baseball that next summer. And I figured I'd just kind of kick the can down the road and took a GA's position and then fell in love with coaching, and the rest is history.
Yeah. And Michael, in terms of your career, were the courses that you took at Hill or the people that you met, did that, help chart your course in that direction?
I think that probably more than charting my course, it made the path that I did choose a little smoother. I think that it's probably fairly common on these calls, Zach, for students or alumni to come on and say, my time at the Hill absolutely prepared me for what was next in college and made that path easier because I had the structure and I had the academic rigor that, what I was stepping into wasn't as a leap as much as it was a step.
Right.
I think that when I reflect back on that, I think that what made the difference was the relationships, the people that I met on campus and continue to interact with up to this day. One of my favorites on campus was Mr. Ruth, and that's probably not a surprise for you to hear that because I'm sure that you hear it regularly. Tom Ruth and I had lunch or dinner on a regular basis throughout my career, and Mr. Ruth, I would have to tell him that I had to go. When we had dinner, it was 2 a.m. He's like, I could stay and talk all night. I said, Tom, I know, I need to get home and go to bed. And Tom was very Tom Ruth was really generous with his time, his money, his attention, and I think that he took on a number of individuals in the class as personal projects. And the reason that I sit on the board of the Foreign Policy Research Institute is because of Tom Ruth.
We could have a long conversation about Tom Ruth, and indeed we have in the past. But yeah, he definitely instrumental in a lot of young men's and young women's paths after the Hill. So, so other than the Grey Poupon photograph, any hijinks between the two of you or good stories that we want to tell or not tell before we move to the next chapter here? I've stumped you.
I don't think so. I mean, I was
you were good, rule-abiding young men.
Straight-laced. I was a straight-laced kid.
Too busy with your homework to do anything fun. Other than your roommate, who apparently didn't quite follow the rules.
He was not a rule follower.
Any good memories of Tom up to no good or
well, we know better than to tell those stories, Zach. But I will tell you that the Hill School was probably a kinder, more gentle, nicer place than it was back in 1987.
Well, we have a lot of your classmates on the call here today, so maybe one of them will share a story. All right, let's fast forward a little bit. Tom, I want to hear a little bit more. I know you're probably tired of telling the story, but giving up a kidney, that's a big deal, right? Especially for one of your players, not a family member. It's a young man who's only been on your team for what, a year, not even. How did that happen?
So Kevin was a 5-tool player, the kind of kid that can come in and change a program. And when I recruit all our players, I tell them that I'll treat them like family. I mean, I promise their parents that, that I'll treat them like one of my own and give them the shirt off my back if they need it. And, in the recruiting process, Kevin and his family put a lot of trust in Wake Forest. We were a new coaching staff at at a school that had been struggling in baseball the past few years. And he was being recruited by Arizona State and Texas and Florida and everybody in between. And so for him, he took a leap of faith to come to Wake Forest. And that always meant a lot to me. He was kind of in our first recruiting class, and he took a chance on us. So in that spring of his senior year in high school, he got sick and nobody knew what it was. And I was getting calls from professional baseball scouts, and he was supposed to go in the first round. So there was a chance we weren't even going to see him. But I was getting calls from scouts saying that, he doesn't look good. He looks like he's lost weight. He looks lethargic. He's not the same player he was in just a few months ago. And so I called the dad, and the dad was like, well, we think he's got a virus, but everything's going to be okay. So fast forward, another 2 months goes by, and he's continuing to lose weight. He's missing games now. He's missing school now. I talked to his agent, Joel Wasserman, or Joe Wolf from the Wasserman Company in Southern California. And I was like, Joel, what do you got? I was like, the dad, he doesn't know what's going on. What can we do here? And Joel was like, look, we finally got him an appointment at Emory Hospital to see a specialist. So he went to Emory. He was from a small town in Georgia, Vienna, Georgia, which is like a suburb of Columbus. And, he's come from farm country. And so they were just seeing the local town doc. So Kevin finally got to Emory. They diagnosed him with Ncaa vasculitis. And by the time he got to campus, his kidney function was at about 8%. And, I always talk about Kevin that, a lot of people have given me a lot of credit for that story for courage, but the courage in the story is Kevin Jordan. I mean, think about yourself, growing up in small town Georgia, and you move 7 hours to Winston-Salem to be a baseball player when you're fighting for your life and you're tethered to a dialysis machine. I mean, I don't know a lot of us that would have left our home under those conditions like Kevin did. So the first meeting I had with the parents and Kevin, I didn't even recognize him. Like if his parents hadn't been with him, I would have walked right past him and not known him. I mean, he was 50 pounds lighter. He was a different skin tone. He looked like a patient. And so the next day we went to the hospital with his family to meet with his new doctor. He had been seeing a pediatric nephrologist at Emory, and he was going to transition to meet with an adult nephrologist at Wake Forest Baptist, Dr. Friedman. So I went the next day with our trainer and Kevin's parents and Kevin, and I listened to that doctor talk about everything that Kevin had been through the past, 8 months of his life, from the first day he was sick to the day he arrived on campus. And, he was a young man that, he was taking 32 pills a day. He was convinced, they were convinced at the time that medication was going to reverse this and they would be able to save the kidneys. So as we're sitting there listening to Dr. Friedman say, flat out, medication is not going to fix what you have. You need a new kidney. So the first thing we're going to do is get you off all this medication, figure out if the Ncaa bacteria is gone. And then once it's gone, we're going to start to go through the transplant process. So as I was sitting there listening to that, I mean, it was just one of those things where I just had to help. I mean, I was like, there was just no way that I was going to not do something if I could. So we were touring the facility, and I grabbed his dad, and I just told his dad, I said, look, Kevin's blood type and my blood type are the same, and I'm happy. I'll get tested right now. Again, I didn't know what that meant. Quite honestly, I didn't know what giving a kidney entailed or what the procedure was or what the risks were. I had no idea. It was just one of those things where Kevin needed something and I was the same blood type, and I knew that was the first marker. So it's like, okay, this is what we're going to do. And Zach, was one of those things where, I walked out of that meeting the first day and I called my mom and I was like, I know it's going to be me. I know it's going to be me. And it was just one of those things where I just felt it in my heart that I was meant to be there at that time with Kevin Jordan, and it was going to be my kidney that he needed. So at any rate, we went through the process. They tested his mom. She wasn't a match, she didn't quite meet the score. You need an 80 on the scale, and she was like a 78 and heartbroken. The dad couldn't do it for whatever reason. The brother couldn't do it for whatever reason. And I just remember the dad calling me and saying, hey, are you willing to go get tested? And I was like, tell me where to go and what to do. And, as the saying goes, the rest is history.
Well, I can't even imagine, just so selfless and an amazing story that he then comes back and plays for you and ends up now being your partner in this. So, Michael, you knew this story well before getting the game, right? You stayed in touch with Tom and knew what he was up to and heard the story and probably talked to him along the time. What, as a classmate and a friend, what were you thinking at the time? Did you call Tom and say, Tom, you're crazy? Like this is, or was it just everything you knew about Tom made it sound natural?
It's the latter for sure. If you look on the inside of my yearbook, the dial, and you read Tom's inscription to what he wrote, is basically is, if there's anything you ever need, call me. And a lot of people would throw that out as
he meant like a ride or something, like he ride or something.
Zach, most of us do mean a ride, right? But Tom doesn't, and that's one of the things. So although we knew each other at Hill, I would say that our relationship really blossomed after this event. We reconnected, and I consider Tom the brother that I never had. I consider his kids no different than my kids. We vacationed together. And when we were in Chicago, maybe 7 years ago, I said to him, look, you have a lot of paid-in capital, right? You do a lot of work and give a lot of yourself selflessly to other organizations and causes. And maybe it's time you consider starting your own organization and really honing in on what's important to you and how you can make a difference. And so we talked about it that weekend, and we picked it up and dropped it off, and nothing really resonated. And I said, look, when you find it, call me and I'll chair your board and I'll help you get things up and running. And he said, deal. So
here we are.
I'll fast forward to June. I'm driving in my car, and he said, brother, what is it going to take for me to get you to move to Winston-Salem, North Carolina?
So, this now circles back to your relationship, right, with your former player, and things started happening in the United States this past summer. And so what was the tipping point where you just said, this is what we've got to do?
So shortly after Memorial Day and the tragic murder of George Floyd, I was calling all of my former players of color and just checking in on them just to see how they were doing, and current players too, just to see, we're here in this pandemic and people are kind of isolated in their homes. And I just wanted to make sure they were doing okay and see how their families were responding to this, and, lend a shoulder of support or an ear to bend, whatever they needed. And of course,
that's got to be like dozens, if not hundreds of players, right, over your career.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it's, 23 years as a head coach and then another, few years as an assistant coach. So yeah, I mean, it's a bunch of players. And one of those calls was, of course, to Kevin Jordan. And I was asking him, we were just kind of in a conversation. I was asking him what he wanted to do with his life. He had done some coaching and some other things, and he really hadn't kind of found his footing and on what he was going to do with the rest of his life. And he was talking about being a teacher. And so somehow we got on a story, and I told him a story on this call that I'd never told him before, which was when I found out I was a match, I had to go to somebody close to me, for lack of a better word, for permission. And I went to this person and I said, as you know, Kevin Jordan needs a kidney, because I hadn't really told anybody. I hadn't told my mom was really, through the process, my mom was really the only person who knew what was going on. I just didn't share it with a lot of people because in case I wasn't a match. I said to this gentleman, I said, I'm a match and I want to give my kidney to Kevin Jordan. And he kind of looked at me with a puzzled look and he was like, well, can you do that? And I was like confused by that question. And he followed up with, well, isn't Kevin Black? And again, it wasn't a malicious or a racist question, as I've told people, as I've told the story. It was just not understanding science. Like he just didn't understand. And, I was telling Kevin this story and I remember my response to that question very clearly, which was, well, yeah, my blood and his blood are the same. And that's all that matters. And as I was telling Kevin that story in the midst of, in the aftermath of George Floyd and the protests and the riots and the explosive situation around the country, it just hit me like a bolt of lightning that's the message that the kids in the schools need to hear. Like they need to see Kevin and I standing next to each other with our arms around each other saying, my blood and his blood are the same, and that's all that matters. And we're in this together. And when you come together, miracles can happen. Great things can happen, right? Who would have thought I would be a match for Kevin Jordan's kidney when his mom and his brother and his father weren't, right? So again, as Michael said, I hung up the phone with Kevin and I called Michael and I said, I have an idea for a nonprofit. I want to take our story into the schools, and I want to follow that up, right? I don't want to be a motivational speaker, because those are great, and they talk for 45 minutes and they inspire you, and you promised yourself you're going to make all these changes, and then 2 days later, everything's back to the way it was beforehand. So, what we needed to add to this was the follow-up curriculum and content, that we would deliver to the schools, where they can continue this conversation and parlay that into real change. It can't be just talk. There's got to be action at the end of this journey. So Get in the Game was born, and Kevin went from wanting to be a teacher to being our director of community outreach, and Michael's our executive director, and we've got a board, and we've made a lot of progress in the short 8 months or whatever it's been since Memorial Day.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're starting a new organization that works with young people in schools during a global pandemic, right? So, you guys could have had better timing maybe in terms of how you did it, but maybe that was a blessing in disguise. Like, it was a way to get into schools and find a way. So, Michael, how I've been an executive director before, you're doing a lot of different things. You're raising money, you're raising awareness, you're organizing your team, your volunteers, but the key here is building the curriculum and getting into schools. So how did you do that, and how has it gone?
Well, you're right. When you sit on the other side of the board in the executive director chair, you're really a jack of all trades. But you hit on it that this wasn't going to have legs, as Tom said, without the right curriculum. And neither Tom nor I come from an education background, and that's really where Tom had the foresight to reach out to one of his friends and colleagues from his days at GW. And this woman, her name is Amanda. She marshaled an amazing team, Zach, of educators, both from public and private schools. And it was really a Herculean effort to be able to synthesize a preliminary curriculum inside of, I'll say, about 6 weeks. Your comment about the silver lining of pandemic, also true. We would have liked to been in more schools, and we probably had the opportunity to. I think the silver lining was that there were private schools in North Carolina that were open for in-person learning, and that gave us the opportunity to be more hands-on with those organizations. So rather than going deep, rather than going wide, we went deep with a smaller number of schools. And the feedback, both from students as well as facilitators, was amazing. Being in the classroom and watching what was going on was most certainly life-changing.
So how many schools did you work with this year so far?
Well, go ahead, Tom. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so we've been in 3 different private schools in North Carolina with a couple clubs in each of those schools. And then we've been with the Washington Nationals Youth Academy. And then we're about to start in 2 public schools here within the next week here in North Carolina, Page High School and Andrews High School. So and then the goal is to branch out to at least 5 cities and maybe more this fall. So we're in the process of building our technology.
I heard that there's a school that's been open all year in Pennsylvania, in Pottstown. Maybe we could be one of your new cities or new towns.
We'd love it.
We would love to have you. Done.
Yeah. Well, that'd be a great. Well, we have a lot of students on here tonight, so I'm sure they'd love to hear more about the curriculum. Well, I'm going to turn to we're at the half hour now, so in a minute here, I'm going to turn to our audience. I just want to remind them that now's a good time to start putting questions in the Q&A box or raising your hand, and hopefully have a great conversation. I just want to ask a couple more questions while that's going on. What have you learned just in this short period of time? You've gone from an inspiration, an idea, you've then put some teeth to it, Mike, working with Amanda at Georgetown and a team of people. You've now been in schools, I'm sure you've iterated, made a lot of changes. What do you think are your biggest takeaways as entrepreneurs here, social entrepreneurs, that you weren't learning in other aspects of your career or your life, that you have learned from this Get in the Game experience?
I think that I would say that the kids always surprise us to the upside. Kevin and I were talking about this afternoon, and when there would be debate about a specific lesson or a specific idea, and the question was always, are they ready? Or is this right? I think that we were always surprised, positively surprised to the upside, that the kids were willing to go faster than we were. And Zach, in a startup world, you're always going quickly. And sometimes you question whether, you ought to be tapping the brakes, in some ways. But I will tell you that watching the kids respond to this tells me that they're hungry for it. They're ready to have these conversations, and that we're most certainly on the right track.
Tom, how about you? What have been your biggest takeaways?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I would add to it that, I think most everybody we run into, right, this story resonates with them, and they want to help, they want to be involved, and they want to help be the change, right? I think I talk about Urban Meyer, right, and all the time with his 90-10, right? And Urban Meyer talks about how 10% of the any organization, whether it's a team or a school, they get it, right? You don't have to coach those guys, and 10% of the organization will never get it. And then what you got to do is really coach the 80% in the middle. And that's how I feel about this race conversation, right? 10% of the world gets it, 10% of the world will never get it. And that 80% in the middle, man, they're hungry for it. They want to be involved. They want to learn. They want to say and do the right things. They want to be intentional in word, thought, and deed. They want to take action, but quite honestly, they don't know what to do. And it's a scary space right now to be in, because whatever you say can get picked apart by somebody. So I think what happens is, when you're in that stage of trepidation, you tend to do nothing. And I think what I've learned through this is people want to take action. People want to be involved. They just need a little nudge. They need a little help. They need a little education, and they need to be empowered. And I know, great things can happen. Connor in the chat box asked a great question, what the proudest moment is. And I'll tell you, Connor, a story about Abby at Greensboro Day School. Michael and I were in the classroom, and they were talking about how their differences are their superpowers, which I love that distinction, right? Talking about how we're different and turning that into an advantage, not something to be picked on about. And Abby was kind of trying to figure out what her superpower was. And she said, well, that she's this cute as a button, 8th grade, white girl. And she said, I used to think that because I was white and I came from privilege, that I couldn't talk about race. And she goes, and now, we're a month into Getting the Game. And she goes, and now I know not only do I need to talk about race, but I have an obligation and a responsibility to talk about race. And she goes, so my superpower is transparency. She goes, I'm just going to be transparent. And, one of the early conversations I had, Zach, was with Herman Urey, who's on our board of trustees here at Wake Forest. And he said to me one of the most important and poignant and powerful things anybody said to me so far, which was, he said, Tom, from the time a young Black man can think for himself, he understands that he has to be super intentional with every interaction he has with a white person. What he says, how he says it, how he dresses, body language, nonverbal cues, all of it. He goes, and until white people understand that they need to be super intentional with every interaction they have with a person of color, he said, we won't get there. And he goes, and we can't get there unless we get there together. And Abby, who's been in this program all of 3 weeks, she got it. She nailed it. And she's in the 8th grade, and she understands what 90% of the world is struggling to understand right now. So pretty cool.
That is amazing. And we do 8th grade. It's a good time to apply to the Hill School. We might have to call up Abby and this to our community. We need some more transparency among our students too. So, these are awesome experiences, and so grateful for you both for sharing them. So let's turn to some questions. We don't have any hands up yet, but I'm hoping that someone will be brave enough to ask a question. So you answered Connor's question, which was about your proudest moment regarding the business. Tyrese wants to know, are you only doing schools in North Carolina? I think you sort of answered that, but Michael, maybe give us a sense of your growth plan in terms of where you're headed next, hopefully maybe post-pandemic when it's a little easier.
Yeah, so I think that you and Tom both hit on it. Our plans are this fall to expand to at least 5 cities. We're hard at work in the Philadelphia and the Pennsylvania area. That's where I am now, and we're laying the groundwork there. But we hope to take this to a variety of cities in the fall. So once we're able to get out and about, we'll be in a number of cities and hopefully at least 25 by next year.
One of the questions I have, I think it sounds to me like because of the pandemic, you started with some private schools and have added some public schools. This has been a real challenge, especially for private schools, right? That are less diverse in many cases than public schools, sometimes more diverse in different ways. Is it your hope to continue to have a variety of types of school, or would you prefer to be in more public schools or more private schools? What do you think is the right strategy?
We think that we think that everybody needs to hear this message. And
right.
So, if you look at when Tom and I were at Hill in '87, you would most certainly not consider it a diverse campus. And in situations like that, Zach, you would argue that that the need is just as great. It just looks different at the start. So, when Tom and I were talking and I asked him about his vision, he just basically said, I'd like this to be available to every middle school and high school kid in the country.
Wow. And do you adjust your curriculum based on the type of school, the size of the school, the kinds of kids you're working on, the grade level?
We're absolutely doing that right now, Zach. Right now we've got just a middle school and a high school playbook, which are slightly different. We're in the process now of finding somebody to help us write a playbook that's in Spanish. We're in the process now of designing a playbook that will be for inner city schools. For those kids whose walk to school is much different, who are wondering if they're going to be able to put food on their, if they're going to have dinner tonight. That's obviously a much different message and much different curriculum than it would be for the typical high school kid. So we're going to have all sorts of different versions of this playbook here, hopefully, by next fall.
Well, that's a good segue to the next question, which comes from Jennifer, who asks, how can we as parents and students help your organization? We have a lot of students studying Spanish here at Hill, or whose first language is Spanish. Maybe they can help with that translation. But what other ways can parents or students or other alumni, for that matter, help your organization?
I think that as a startup, you always have an overwhelming number of needs. So I think that there are a variety of ways that people on this call can help right now, and it could be as simple as learning a little bit more about our organization. If this message resonates with you, digging deep, our website is getinthegame.org. A lot of the things we talked about and more you can find on our website. If you're interested in following along on our journey on social media, GITG for Get in the Game, GITG for Change, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. We are going to be holding an event on March 4th. And on that event, you're going to be able to hear from some of the facilitators who are teaching this program. You're going to hear their perspective. You're going to hear from the students. And then an in-depth interview with our team. So I invite you to connect with us on our website. And if that's of interest to you, we'd love to have you.
And if families involved with the school and they want to get in the game to the school, is it as easy as sort of sending you an email and applying for that?
reach out, and we'd love to have that conversation. And whether it's at the Hill or another organization or that's local to one of our alumni's communities, we'd love to be a part of that conversation for sure.
And how are you funding that? Like, is there a cost to the school, or are you funding it privately through donors and foundations and that sort of thing? That was my softball question to you, Tom.
Yeah, right now we're funding it through donations. We haven't charged any schools as of yet. It's something that we're considering doing, having a licensing fee at some point, because it's the old philosophy, right? If you give away a gym membership, then it's not valued and nobody goes, right? So we want to live in that sweet spot where it's available to everybody. But at the same time, we want them to devote the time and the resources and the people to it. So again, if they've spent some money on it, the school is more likely to put the full weight of the school behind it and find the space and find the facilitators. So we're still debating that, quite honestly. I mean, I know there's a big part of Michael and myself that would like to keep it free for all schools. But we're in talks now to figure out if that's the best thing to do moving forward or not.
Sure. And the program is it during the classroom day, or is it more of a co-curricular club type program?
So, yeah, great question. So one of our clubs is running it as part of their class, and then everyone else is running it as an after-school program. And eventually we want to take this, once the curriculum is proven, we want to take this to the NCAA and petition that they make it a mandatory core course. As you know, Zach, that athletes, there's 16 core courses that athletes have to take. Right. So one of our long-term goals for the organization is that we take our course to the NCAA and petition that they make our social equity course mandatory for anybody who wants to be a student athlete. And if that happens, then our curriculum's in every high school in the country, which is,
right. So through the clearinghouse, basically, it would be a requirement. That would be amazing. Then you'd have to make it even more accessible. It'd have to be online, because not every school could support it, right? You'd have to be able to do that. That's amazing. That's a great idea. When was the last time the NCAA added a core course?
Well, they just raised it. It used to be 14 and now it's 16, but they just added an elective and they added another English. So we need to, again, for me, this is a no-brainer. And I think we can pull it off. I think we've got a head start on the competition. I think somebody's going to do this, right? I mean, I think it's coming down the pike. And if we can get there first with kind of it all wrapped up in a nice, neat package, I think we've got a real shot.
It's a terrific idea. I'm glad you thought of it. All right, next question. Well, this is more of from one of your classmates, from William. I won't say his last name. Says, Mike, don't forget your day boy roots, old friend. You did plenty of time in Donner Hall. My question, what does success and impact look like in the near and long term? Growth of schools and numbers, I'm sure, but love to hear the most ambitious vision for your initiative. I think we just heard it. Sure. But maybe there's more to that. You want to be in every school in the country eventually, it sounds like.
So I'm pretty sure I know who that is. But I'll tell you that the other part of this program that we haven't really talked about, Zach, is that this isn't just a curriculum. And we really see teaching, having these kids discover who they are, what they believe, and why, and then turning that into action, right? And so activating them socially. One of my mentors early in life said, during your career, you learn, you earn, and you give back. But we see that not as sequential, but we see it as continuous. And so having these kids being activated socially and philanthropically with their thoughts, their words, their actions, their efforts is foundationally important. So when you ask sort of what is our vision, I'm going to let Tom dig a little bit deeper on that, but we think that this program can activate kids socially, in a big way. And that's really where you're going to see lifetime impact and legacy. Tom, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, please. Thank you. So we have 3 seasons of our playbook, and Michael said it perfectly. Season 1 is all about who am I? Where did I come from? What do I stand for? Season 2 is all about, how did the world get where it is today? What are the things that happened in the past, legislation in the Reagan administration, et cetera, et cetera. that got us where we are now. And then season 3 is all about empowering these kids to get into their community and make a change and be the change. And there's all sorts of ways they can do that, whether it's organ donation or, a food bank or inner city sports, whatever. There's going to be a buffet of things that these schools are going to be able to choose from. But one of the things we want to do once they graduate, quote unquote, from our program is we're building an app and we're calling it Equity Avenue. So these kids will have an off ramp to go once they complete the program, and they're going to live on this app where they're going to be able to do all sorts of things. They're going to have literacies. They can do deep dives on legal literacies, financial literacies, wellness, storytelling, marketing, et cetera. And the list goes on and on. But one of the other things we're going to be able to do on there is keep track of their community service hours, right? So what we're hoping is 5 million, our goal is to have 5 million kids living on our app, and 20% of those people doing 10 hours of community service a week. And that's 120 million hours of community service that these game changers, we're calling them, will be doing. And one of the other things we want to do there is support Black-owned businesses. One of the things we've learned in this, Zach, is that there's only 2 states out of our 50 that have more than 3% of their businesses are Black-owned, 2 of our 50 states. So we want to support Black-owned businesses each month in each of our communities and help them drive business and help them, empower those businesses to grow and prosper. So if we can, if we're in 20 cities and we can empower a different Black-owned business in each one of those cities each month, then again, we've changed the narrative. So again, those are a couple of our kind of long-term bucket list goals, but they all center around this Equity Avenue app. We don't want to just graduate these kids from the program and leave them hanging. We'll have links to the Common Application on there. They're going to be able to apply for scholarships. We want to give away $1 million in scholarships a year in Get in the Game scholarships for these kids that are out there doing great things. One of our visions is for this is it's kind of akin to being an Eagle Scout, right? The kids are, writing about it on their college applications about how Get in the Game changed their life. And this is the difference I made in my community. And this is what I'm doing. And we want them to be proud of the work they're doing. So, and Michael said it perfectly, getting these kids to live a life of service over self. And I know you guys at the Hill preach that better than anybody. I learned that lesson there, and I'm eternally grateful for it.
Are you already in the process of designing the app, or is that just early stage thinking?
We are in the process. We're in conversations with a couple of different kind of vendors, quote unquote. Right now I would say a vendor, Robots and Pencils, is kind of the leader in the clubhouse, so to speak, but you know how that is, that can change. So we're in conversations with a couple of different people now to begin that process.
And both of you, I read your bios to the whole audience here. You guys are pretty busy guys, right? Tom, you said you start your season in 10 days, head coach of a big Division I program. And Mike, you've got lots of different organizations and businesses that you're involved with. How are you guys finding the time to do this? This is like a full-time job on top of a full-time job on top of a full-time job, right?
Well, if you know Tom, he doesn't do anything halfway, and it doesn't matter. He always has a capacity for more. But the fact is, Zach, is that this is important, and the window for this to happen is now. And so while some of the other things may be a distraction, this has to be a focus. And we can't do it alone. So I think that part of our mission right now is finding people, finding friends, finding colleagues who can help us. And so that, that sitting in this role, that's job number one. You have to build a constituency. You have to build an audience that can both hear and support your mission. So we're most certainly not doing it alone.
Well, hopefully some people on this call tonight are going to raise their hand, not tonight, raise their hand to help you. All right, Kem has a question. Hi, Tom mentioned his background was from a small town in Pennsylvania. Was your experience at the Hill instrumental in getting more exposure to different cultures, races, backgrounds, which helped shape your worldview?
Oh, without question. The Hill School changed the trajectory of my life. the Hill School got me to Georgetown. It prepared me for Georgetown. Michael said it perfectly. I got to Georgetown and I wasn't overmatched, which coming from Johnstown High School, probably I would have been in my career. Would have, not that I would have gotten into Georgetown out of Johnstown High, because I probably wouldn't have. But the Hill not only prepared me, but it changed my way of thinking. It got me to dream a little bigger. And that, at the heart of getting the game is getting these kids to dream big. And, we've all had that one person in our life that has been instrumental. And I know for a lot of us, it's a parent, but for some of us, it's a teacher or a coach, that got us to believe that anything was possible and that dreams do come true. And the Hill School did that for me. The Hill School opened my eyes to the big world out there. And again, not many of my friends have left Johnstown, but because of the Hill School, I got to Georgetown, and that led me to where I am today. And I want to pay that forward.
Tom, have you been recruiting out of Johnstown, trying to find the next Tom Walter?
We need better. We need better players than that. But
how about the Hill? Have you grabbed any recruited any kids from the Hill?
The Hill School, we've got we're playing Northeastern in the opening weekend, and they've got a Hill School player on the Northeastern roster. Last name is Easy E.
Yeah, Michael.
Yeah. So
he was scheduled to go to Georgetown. I didn't know he went to Northeastern.
Yeah, he's a freshman at Northeastern right now, and
it changed. Things happen quickly around here.
Yeah, Georgetown had a coaching change, so that was probably part of it. But
could be, and I think the pandemic has also caused a lot of transfers. And like, he's a good player. Watch out.
Yeah, no doubt.
All right, so you guys mentioned earlier the superhero exercise, and Ryan asks, are there any activities that you can talk about that you do to teach students to be the change? Michael, anything you can think of, that you can share quickly about an exercise that's been really effective?
Tom, why don't you talk a little bit about the exercise you took them through? I think that's a better example than the one that I would give.
Yeah, so we have an exercise we call Endgame, and we talk to the class, and we tell them that everybody is in one of 5 categories, right? You are either an observer, you're a participant, you're a contributor, you're a leader, or you're a game changer. And again, there's not a good or bad place to be on that continuum. I mean, sometimes we need to be an observer because we're gathering more information. But the question we get these kids, that we get them first to define each of these categories, like what are the attributes of an observer versus a participant versus a contributor versus a leader versus a game changer. And what we're driving at with them is if you're an observer, who are you changing? You're really not changing anybody. You're not even changing yourself, really. If you're a participant, you're changing yourself. If you're a contributor, you're changing the group that you're in. If you're a leader, you're really changing the school. And then if you're a game changer, you're changing your community and or the world. So the point of the exercise is to get them to understand how they show up, right? How am I showing up? And I might think I'm a leader when in reality, my classmates view me as a participant or even as an observer. So part of the exercise we do is we get the kids to put some thought into where they think they are on the spectrum. And then we ask their classmates, how these kids are showing up and what are they actually. And what we're trying to do is get their vision, their kind of impression of how they show up aligned with how others see them, right? And I tell my players all the time, right? Perception is reality. If you might think you're showing up one way, but if the rest of the world thinks you're showing up a different way, that's who you are, So point is, we're trying to get them to understand. And again, if you're intentionally being an observer because you're gathering information, that's great. I have no problem with that. So long as when we find something that we're passionate about, something that we believe in, we're moving further to the right on the board and we're moving towards that game changer status. So we call the exercise Endgame because it's all about, how I show up and what I'm moving towards.
And Tom, you speak about this very eloquently for someone who's only been in this organization for less than one school year. Some of this has got to be coming from your coaching background. Some of these lessons are not just, some administrator at Georgetown who helped you with the curriculum. Some of this, things you're talking to your players year in, year out over a 20+ year career, right?
Yeah, so I've done this exercise with my team. The categories are a little different. Category number one for my players is survivor. Category category number two is competitor. Category number three is contributor, and category number four is leader. Category number category number four is winner, and then category number five is champion. And again, getting them to understand, if you're a survivor, you're not impacting anybody in your life, right? If you're a competitor, you're only impacting yourself. If you're a contributor, you're impacting kind of our team. If you're a winner, you're impacting our program. And as I tell our players, I asked our players this question recently on a Zoom call: who are you impacting if you're a champion, right? And nobody had an answer for that. It was kind of crickets, Zach, and it was silence. And I was basically leaned in real close, and I was like, every single person you interact with every single day of your life. That's what a champion is, right? A champion makes a difference in everybody's life every single day. And again, we're all striving to be champions in our life. We're all striving to be game changers in our life. And we want to help these kids that get in the game have a clear and kind of obvious path to being that game changer.
Yeah. I mean, I've had a lot of good coaches in my life, Tom. And I've been a coach, and it's very clear that this is coming from a place of passion for you and a place of experience. And you've had some lucky student athletes along the way to have that mentorship. So thank you for sharing that all these years. I have a few more questions here. We're not going to be able to get to them all tonight, and we still don't have anyone raising their hand. And I wish for you guys, we could just go through the list and find one of your classmates and call on them and just, but in any event, a question here is, and this may be for Michael, what has been the biggest challenge faced by the organization, and how have you encountered them, or encountered that challenge? How have you dealt with it?
I think that we talked about some of it earlier, right? Which is that you're a startup during pandemic. You're doing something that's never been done before in the way that you're doing it. So you have that confluence of challenges with limited startup resources, and you're a nonprofit. So you're figuring out new things every day. From experience, you learn that you're not going to have all of the answers. And while that may make you slightly uncomfortable at the beginning, it's progress and not perfection. And I think that there's the balance, Zach, right? Is that you have a mission and you have an ultimate goal, but you can't lose sight of the journey along the way. So if you've ever been in the startup world, you realize that, quite frankly, some of your happiest times are not when you've gotten to $1 billion or not when you've gone public, but it's when you're in the trenches together. And Tom and I will tell you that we know each other well, but we've learned both different sides of each other through this process. Yeah. Most certainly. And it's nothing but positive. I think that the fact that Kevin and I spend a lot of time on the phone and on Zoom calls every day. And, we did something this afternoon I'll quickly share with you online. And it was almost like being a proud parent, watching him from week to week, just the confidence and the ideas that are coming, through him for what could be in the future. Just it's inspiring. So yes, there are challenges, and there are many challenges, but you wouldn't have it any other way.
Well, I envy you both. You're doing a startup nonprofit in your early 50s. I did my first startup nonprofit in my early 20s, and I didn't have a clue what I was doing in any way whatsoever. And a lot of failure. You learn quickly, but I'm sure it's still the same. It doesn't really matter how old you are when you start one of these things. There's just a lot of learning that goes into it. So hopefully some of the lessons you learned at Hill in terms of the perseverance and resilience made a difference. I have a question here from Kathy, one of our faculty members. She says, this is also inspiring. Thank you both. All third formers who are taking the H-term course, which is our experiential learning program right now during the winter months when we're mostly remote. They've been participating in a 2-week component focusing on community service, and most of them should be watching. They were instructed to do so. And I see a lot of their names on there. She says, I agree students are ready for this. My course participants, for the most part, have indicated that community service should, in fact, be a required part of their high school experience. A few question whether people should be voluntold to do good works, at least until they have such a positive, life-changing experience. Can you speak to the value of being voluntold or volunteered to get involved in service activities?
Yeah, the one thing I've learned over the years, Zach, is that when you give something of yourself, what you get in return is far more valuable than what you gave. And I learned that through the kidney donation. I've learned that through, Habitat for Humanity, building houses in New Orleans with my team and soup kitchens in Washington, D.C., and so forth and so on. Anytime, you give of yourself and you pour into something, what you get in return is far more valuable than your time. So, I like engaging the kids and having them make their decision in what they get involved in. Quite honestly, it doesn't matter to me what community service project you get involved in. If there's something you're passionate about and something you have a heart for, then that's what I think you should do. I think the one thing we've learned about kids today is that when they believe in something, they go after it, and when they don't, they turn off. And that's just the generation we deal with. I get frustrated when other coaches in the business say these kids today don't work hard, because that's not true. They work very hard, but the difference is they have to believe in what they're working towards, and they have to understand why they're doing it. And that's different from our generation, Zach. We were just kind of, we did what our elders told us to do because that's how we were raised. These kids today, they question, they challenge, they think out of the box, they're creative. I love these kids today. I mean, they inspire me, quite honestly. So, for me, I love the voluntold saying, but I would like the kids to be part of the decision in what they're going to do, because I think they'll have a better passion for it, and they'll work harder at it, if that makes sense.
Well, it does make sense, and it's a fantastic note to end on. I want to thank you both for spending the hour and 6 minutes with us today. I know your classmates and your former teachers here at the Hill are really proud of both of you and grateful for what you're doing. I certainly am, and grateful for you sharing this with our students. Michael had reached out to me earlier this fall, and I think I was in the middle of the chaos of trying to get our school year off the ground. And I'm just so glad that we've been able to circle back and share your story and learn more. The website is getinthegame.org. The social media tag sounds like it's GITG, and fill in the blank after that for different platforms, right? They'll find it. And you've got a big event coming up on March 4th.
That's right.
So hopefully our students will get the word out, and we'll have a big Hill contingency, and let's talk offline about how we get in the game here to the Hill School. Sounds like we want to be in on the ground floor of this as well. So good luck, Tom, with your season coming up. We didn't get a chance to talk about that, but I'll be following. I'll join the Wake Forest baseball social media momentarily and see how you do, and hopefully keep your kids healthy and safe and active. We've been able to do a little bit of interscholastic competition this winter with our low residency program. We're looking forward to a more robust spring season as well, if we can pull that off. So, Michael, good luck as you find your way as an executive director. It's a new role, new hat for you to wear in some ways, but an old one as well. And we'll look forward to seeing you both on campus.
That's right.
Upcoming reunion, not too long in the future for both of you. So we'll have you back, and maybe we'll all get in the game then. Thanks for joining me tonight, guys. I'm gonna just share my screen here. We can see that picture there. There it is, one more time. In case you all wanted to see them, there they are. Now that you've been staring at them, you can see there. There's the Grey Poupon ad again. Just a little last-minute embarrassment for you both. Thanks for being good sports about that. Thanks to everyone for joining us tonight. We had a great audience tonight. Thanks for terrific questions. We have 4 more events coming up next week. These are all on Tuesday nights. On the 16th, we're going to be talking about investments in life. We'll be joined by the Dougs, Doug Boucard, class of 2000, and Doug Brody, class of 2002, 2 of our trustees, and they'll be talking about their experiences in the investment world. On February 23rd, we'll be joined by Megan Ruan, class of 13, who is working on Capitol Hill for Congresswoman Madeline Dean, and her experience in these last few months has got to be interesting. We'll talk with Nicole Burns on March 2nd, and we learn more about her work at Google. out on the West Coast. And then we'll wrap up the series on March 9th. Hit the wrong button there. We will wrap up the series on March 9th with Pinckney Benedict, class of 82, an author who's going to talk about his experience in writing and growing up in Appalachia. So it's going to be a great series. Tom, Michael, thank you again for joining us tonight. I wish everyone a good night. I am off to deliver Chick-fil-A to some of our students on campus. So there's some hungry mouths in the dorm. So we'll see you guys soon. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Zach.
Good night.